Now go back in time a little bit. How many of you, whether it was your parents or you were raised by a parent or a guardian of some sort, how many of you would have been okay with the people who care for you, most often your parents, picking out your spouse for you? Go back in time and think you're a senior in high school. You're about to turn 18. You are 18. You're about to graduate high school. And your mom and dad said, we have got the perfect man or the perfect woman for you to spend the rest of your life with. Maybe you're fresh into the military out of high school. And your parent says to you, I have picked out a spouse for you. Or you're just starting your first job, or you're into college and you're just getting into experiencing all of that. And the person who cares for you says, I picked out your spouse. How many of you would have been okay with it? You say, my parents, my guardians are so wise, and they're so understanding, and they know me so well, I would have been fine with that. Hands up. Nobody. Some of you, I can see on your face, you know who it would have been. You say, I know exactly who it would have been if mom or dad or grandpa picked out my spouse for me. We are getting juicy right off the bat because some of your spouses are here and you're thinking, you're smiling, thinking it would have been this person because mom and dad liked them the most. And it may not have been the spouse you're with now, and that's okay. But it's kind of a frightening thing to think about. And today we're going to look at the story of Isaac and Rebekah, and their marriage was an arranged marriage. Strange enough. But we also are going to find that not only was it an arranged marriage, but it worked. It worked to the end. They lived a life of love together, and I'm not advocating for that in the least, but we are seeing that in this case, it actually worked out, and God was with them. So we are going to dive right into the middle of it, and as we do so, we are going to discover a vital truth that's going to be the thing that we really want to hang our hat on throughout this entire message together. And so if you want to look to the screen with me or your notes, the key that we're going to look at today is that relationships are significantly better when they are providential. Relationships are significantly better when they are providential. You said, well, Pastor Kevin used a word I'm not sure that I completely get what you're trying to say. So let me just stop for a minute and talk about what that means. When we say relationships are significantly better when they're providential, then what is providence? Well, let's talk about God's divine providence, okay? It's when God is directing and caring for all things in our life out of his wisdom and love. It's when God is directing and caring for all the things in our life out of his wisdom and out of his love, and that includes relationships. Meaning that the people that are coming into your life, God is using his wisdom and his love for you to say, you need this person in your life, whether it's to spend the rest of your life with, or to become a very best friend, BFF, or to be someone who comes along and supports, encourages, or helps you in a time of need. Okay? So when we say the best relationships are providential, what we mean is the best relationships are the ones that God sees fit to bring into our lives because he knows we need them. And that is typically true of any spouse if we are a believer. If we are following Christ, we would hope to believe that that is true. But the best relationships in our life are the ones that God is sending along. And this is not how most relationships work out. Most relationships happen naturally. And they happen naturally because you have things in common. We love sports. We have the same sports team. We're always watching the same streaming shows, and we talk about them over lunch. Or they're from the same place I grew up, and so we kind of connect on that, right? Or if we're looking for a spouse, if we're looking for someone to date, if we're looking for someone to spend the rest of our life, ooh, she's hot. Man, he's fine. Wow, he's everything I've ever been looking for, and you haven't even talked to him yet. You know, right? We kind of form these other ideas. There's nothing wrong with attraction. There's nothing wrong with having a checklist or any of those things. But what we will see in Scripture, and what I would say out of experience that I've known to be true, and I'm sure that you probably know to be true, is that the best relationships are the ones in which we feel that are providential. God brought them into our lives. So what if we just changed everything and we looked at our need of relationships with this type of intentionality? We say, God, you know who I need and when I need them. And I'm praying that you send the people in my life to surround me and to be on my team, that I can benefit from that relationship. I can help them. They can help me. Lord, I pray that you bring the right people into my life. Because we need this in all sorts of ways. You need this as a church family. You need this with friendships. You need people to keep you accountable. You need them in deeper relationships. You need that out of your parent. You need that out of your spouse, and they need that out of you. The best relationships, the most beneficial, the best relationships are the ones that are providential. So we see in this story what is true for Isaac and Rebekah is true for us, and that is God is at work. And he is at work if we are following him and putting him first in our life. God is at work, bringing things across our path, bringing the right people across our path, bringing the right people into our lives, and it's up to us to act with faith and respond accordingly, and that's what happens in this story. So a lot of verses today. We're going to begin in Genesis 24 and verse 1 through 7. We're going to kind of set up the story, and I'm going to have to kind of fill in and paraphrase a few of the details because it would take us forever to read the entire story. But Genesis 24, verse 1 through verse 7. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge over all that he had, he said, put your hand under my thigh. Now, in the old days, if you were going to, make an agreement with someone, they would grab the back of your hamstring. So some of you get nervous in church if someone wants to shake your hand or to hug you. I am glad that we have progressed to handshakes and hugs because that just feels awkward, right? I'd hate to greet someone and just smack them on the back of the hamstring. Good to see you this morning. But that's what happened back in the day. And Abraham is making what we would call a handshake deal. He's doing so a little more awkwardly with his servant. And this is what he's going to ask. He says, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but I will go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which she came? And Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son there. A couple of things. Let's set this up a little bit. If you remember or know much about the story of Abraham and Sarah were really, really old. You don't want to get near 100 years old raising an infant. And that's kind of what happened with them and Isaac. They were so old, there was no way they believed they could conceive. God gave Abraham a promise that he would be the father of many nations, right? And he said, well, how is this possible? Because we're too old. And God gave them a miracle baby named Isaac. And he was essentially the only son in the household for much of their lives. And you can imagine being old parents and there only being one child that he was probably spoiled rotten. I think that's a fair assumption here. But it's possible that Abraham and Sarah did a little too much for him. And we find that at the time of this story, he's like 40 years old, living at home, still single. Okay? And Sarah has died, and he is missing his mother. And Abraham's getting so old that he's worried about Isaac and worried about him in this failure to launch, right? And so he's concerned about all these things. And he says, I'm going to send my servant. I'm going to send him out, and I'm going to look for a wife for my son. I'm looking for my daughter-in-law. I'm going to send my servant out. So one of the first things we see here that speaks to us about our relationships and the type of relationships that God brings into our life is this: that providential relationships recognize that there are wrong people and wrong directions for our lives. If you truly believe that God will bring the people into your life that you need in your life, whatever that relationship may be, if you want to surround yourself by a company of the type of people you need in your life, then you are recognizing that some people will not fit that description. Do you follow me? That there are wrong people for your life also. That there are wrong directions for your life if you're following after God. He has a direction for you. He has a will and a plan for your life. The right people that he sends into your life are going to help you in that direction. They're going to help you pursue the things God wants you to pursue. But if you have the wrong people in your life, they counteract that. There have been many, many people who have thought they were too strong and too smart to allow the wrong people to influence them. And they've jumped in and said, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to buddy with this person, and I'm going to win them to Jesus, and I'm going to influence them. And more often than not, that's not what happens, but the other happens. So Abraham said to his servant, he says, don't pick a wife here. Remember, Abraham came from an idol-worshiping family in Mesopotamia. And God spoke to him, and if you remember the call on Abraham, he says, I want you to go, get away from your family, get away from your homeland. I want you to go in this direction to a land that I will show you, and I am going to make you the father of nations. I'm going to create a people from your offspring, which means he had to leave all that behind. But as he is journeying, he is going through territory where people are idol worshipers, and they are pagans. But there's a lot of good-looking girls there. And Abraham says, you might be tempted to go to these Canaanites and find a wife for him there because it's convenient. They're here. But he says, it's important that you do not choose a wife from the Canaanites. But I want you to go back to my homeland, my people, and find a wife for him. And there's reason to believe that Abraham's family may have at least began to suspect that what Abraham was doing and how God was leading him, that they were at least beginning to understand that this may be the true God. There's reason to kind of understand that a little bit. So it's possible that some of Abraham's relatives, as a result of this call in Abraham's life, had begun to change a little bit. But he says, I want you to go back to my people and choose one. He says, it is important. If she says she won't come back to here, my son cannot go back. I left that for a reason. That's behind me. That's not where God is leading me. God's leading me this direction. So if God is leading me this direction, I'm going to be the father of many nations. And that means my descendants are going to play a very active role. And they can't go back to where I started. We have to keep moving in this direction. So he says it's important that she be of the right people and that she is moving in the right direction, or else it does not work. And that's true for all the relationships in our life. So many times people marry the wrong person, going in the wrong direction because they're lonely or they think, I can change them. Sometimes we take on friendships that we have no business taking on. Oftentimes it can influence us in a negative way. Paul said this in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 14. Paul said, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? Another place he said, bad company will corrupt good morals. So here the idea is when they would plow the fields, there was this yoke, this big double collar that they would put on the beast that would drive that plow. And they were taught in the old days, don't put an ox and a donkey together because they don't have the same strength. And if you're trying to plow with an ox and a donkey in the same collar or yoke, it's not going to help you as you're trying to drive that plow. It's going to be uneven. It's not going to work well. And Paul is equating our relationships to that. Paul says if you are strong and you are bound together with someone who is weaker than you, the likelihood is they're going to pull you back more than you're going to pull them forward. He says, so be careful about the relationships that you have and make sure if you're a believer, they should be a believer. And if you're moving in a direction in your life and you love God and you want to grow and you want to develop, if you're around people who don't, it's not going to help you. And in fact, it can actually pull you back. So especially we think about this in marriage, we want to make sure that the person we marry is someone that God's brought into our lives and they're helping us to move forward. They're helping us to pursue the things that we need to pursue. You hear stories all the time. In fact, my in-laws, my mother-in-law heard from God. I do not question it whatsoever. I'm sure she heard from God. But I'm not so sure they were the greatest match if she had not heard from God, because they came from very, very different backgrounds. Although he may not have been an unbeliever, they came from really diverse backgrounds. But she will tell you to this day that she heard from the Lord, and even though there were some signs there, she followed the Lord, and they're great. And I love them. And they gave me the greatest gift I've ever gotten, right? But you have to be careful. And if she had not heard from God, I probably would have told her, you might want to be careful here. We have to understand that there can be the wrong people and the wrong direction. You follow me? All right. Number two, we see the next thing here is that the servant is going to make his way to Abraham's homeland, and he is looking for a wife for Isaac. One of the most beautiful things he does is he prays and he says, God, I want you to bless my master Abraham, and I ask you to give me favor on my search, on my quest, that I may find a wife for his son. And what we see, number two, is that providential relationships occur as a result of prayer. Providential relationships occur as a result of prayer. So if you find yourself needing more life-giving friendships in your life, instead of complaining that you don't have it, instead of compromising and just hanging out with people who don't really believe like you do or aren't helping you in your growth, you can pray and say, God, I need encouragement. I need you to surround me with life-giving people. I need to have a community. I need to have a tribe. If you are seeking a spouse, you can pray, Lord, I want to follow your plan for my life, but if it's your will that I be married, Lord, send the right person into my path. I would say that to my son. I would say that to any teenager. I would say that to any young adult. If you're looking for a spouse, if you want a family of your own, make it a matter of prayer. And that is what the servant does. The servant says, Father, just bless my quest in finding a daughter-in-law for my master. And so he decides he's going to go down to the well. And at that time of day when the young women would come out to the well, he says, this is what we're going to do. First thing is, I pray, Lord, that if she is the one for Isaac, that she'll come out, and when I ask her for a drink of water, she will offer me that drink. And secondly, he says, but let's not stop there. Let's make it a little more complicated. So I know for sure. The servant says, God, not only may she offer me water when I ask, but that she will give water to all of my camels for my journey. If I remember, I think there were 10 of them. Okay? And so he has not, the Bible tells us in the story that he has not even finished praying. It says that he prayed this in his heart silently, and he had not even finished his thoughts when a young woman named Rebekah comes by. And he says, can I have something to drink? And she says to him, yes, I'll give you water, and I will also take care of all of your camels. What a fascinating thing that he prayed, and before he even finished praying, God had answered his prayer by sending Rebekah. So he asked a few questions, found out that she is from Abraham's family, and she checks all the boxes. And so as he realizes that she's the one, how easy and how quickly God brought that into my path. Look at what happened in Genesis 24 and verse 26 and 27. says the man bowed his head and did what? Worshiped the Lord and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman." So watch this. It's two-sided here. He made sure to acknowledge that good relationships are providential. God sends them your way. So he said, "Lord, I pray that you'll send the right one across my path." And when they came across his path, what did he do? "Thank you for sending them across my path." How much does that change your relationships when you start looking at them as being God-ordained and providential? If I start to think about the story of how I met my wife, and I start thinking about how grateful I am that God brought her into my life, you know, you have those moments where you don't see eye to eye. Does anybody else get frustrated with their spouse? Or it's only me? Okay. But you get frustrated with your spouse, you get frustrated with your children, your best friend, whomever it may be, right? But if you stop to say they were an answer to a prayer, and if you stop to say thank you, you realize how hard it is to continue to be frustrated? You know, if there's moments of frustration or anger, or you're just not, you know, there's some friction there, that you stop and say, "God, thank you for this person you put into my path because I needed them." How quickly that changes things for us, right? Maybe God is speaking to you right now, and there's someone who needs to hear, "I thank you for being in my life." Maybe God will show you someone you can reach out to and say, "You were an answer to prayer. Thank you for being a part of my life." The third thing we see here is this: that providential relationships are marked by an others first mindset. What's the key thing that you know that this is obviously someone put in my life for a reason? It would be that they have a servant's heart. I mean, if you were going out looking for a wife for someone you knew, there might be some other things that you consider. Oh, they come from money, right? Oh, she's so attractive, right? But what was this servant looking for in a wife for Isaac? He saw there was something about her heart that was different, because she owed him nothing. But not only did she go out to get water and was interrupted in her duty, but she gave him water and took care of 10 camels before she did anything she set out to do in the first place. Here's a lady who was willing to exalt the needs of others and put others first. Here is a woman who was not afraid of hard work or to be uncomfortable. Here is someone who exceeded expectations as a goal. Not only will I take care of you, but I'll take care of all of these camels as well. She was perfectly fine going above and beyond. Here is a woman who was willing to be kind above everything else. Those are the type of people you need in your life. And that is the type of friend or parent or spouse that you need to be in the lives of the people around you. He said the best relationships that God puts into our life are the ones who put others above themselves. And that's exactly what he saw in Rebekah that told him, there's something unique about this one. There's something special about this one. She may be the perfect wife for Isaac. Let's look at Philippians 2, verse 3 through verse 7. And Paul told us this. He says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but what? Also, say it with me, to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be held on to be grasped, But he emptied himself and did what? Taking the form of a servant. Jesus, our extreme example. Jesus, our supreme example for what we are to do and how we are to live. What did he do? He put us above himself. And he came with the mindset not to be served, but to serve others. So what is it that we're looking at? I need somebody in my life that can do stuff for me. I need somebody in my life who will check all the boxes of things that I need. What happens to looking at an opportunity? Lord, put people in my life that I can serve their needs and that they will serve mine, that we can help each other. There's something special and unique about those relationships. I told Jason I was going to preach about him. That never makes anybody nervous. But for so long, doing a lot of the setup on Sunday morning, there are always people willing to help and come in. But it is such a refreshing thing to know that there's someone reliable and dependable that will come in and help and be a help to me before church ever begins. And if I'm out of town, if I'm on vacation, whatever, know that it's just going to continue like it always has. And that's something I prayed about for a long time. I never would have guessed that when I met Jason that our relationship would be where it is now. But he's a great blessing to me and a great help to me. There are times that I'm a little much for him and he's a little much for me, and that's okay too, right? You can be a little much for someone else at times and say, okay, we just need space from each other or whatever. But you realize that when someone has the mindset of, I'm here to be a blessing to you, and if you have that same mindset of, I want to be a blessing in return to you, that those are the type of relationships that are gold. If your marriage gets to that place where you say, my marriage is not about getting them, twisting them to do what I want, but how can I serve their needs and put their interest above my own? If you have the husband and the wife doing that, you've got a winning deal there. That was the thing the servant saw in her that said to him, there's something special about this one. She'll work hard. She's kind. She went above and beyond. She put me above her own needs. She was okay with the disruptions and the interruption, whatever she was doing. This is the type of person that would be perfect. Now we're going to fast forward through the arrangements that were made. In the end, Rebekah is offered the chance to come back with the servant, and she chooses to do so. And that's where we see this last big thought that we have about this, and we're going to read the conclusion of this love story that results in a marriage here. The next last big thing that we can talk about this morning is this, that a great love story involves willful choice. A great love story involves willful choice. So we read the story that the servant said, will you leave your family and come back with me? And the family says, no, we're going to keep her around for a little while. And the servant's like, I can't stay here. I said, okay, Rebekah, what do you want to do? And against all the advice of her family, Rebekah stands up and says, I will go. And so on this journey, you can imagine the servant told Rebekah all about Abraham and Isaac and their family and what God was doing. And then we're going to pick up the story in verse 63. It says, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, who is that man? Or she might say, who's that man? I don't know how. I don't know what kind of guy he was, what he looked like. But who is that man walking to the field to meet us? And the servant said, it is my master. And she took her veil and covered herself. You know why? Not that she was bashful, but when they covered with the veil, that means they were pledged to someone. So she takes in that act of faith, before she's even talked to the guy, before she's even been all that close to him, she made that decision when she left mom and dad. She made that decision when she left her home. And when she sees him, she puts her veil on because she is pledged to him. So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac, all the things that had been done. He told Isaac the whole story of providence and God bringing her across his path. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted from his mother's death. Now watch this. So she made that decision long time before. She was going to leave everyone behind, and she was going to go be Isaac's wife. And as soon as she sees him, before she's even heard his voice, she puts that veil on because she is pledged to him. Now, Isaac did something that was very different for his day. It was really common in Isaac's day that you had several wives. I still don't know how they pulled that off. I'm like, how did you even keep track of all the systems that the different ladies would have had? You know, it's so tough just to remember one, right? But it was very common in Isaac's day that you would have had multiple wives. But unlike them, Isaac just had the one. And he pledged himself to Rebekah, a woman that he did not choose. And she pledged herself to Isaac, a man she had never met. And they loved each other for a lifetime. Not because, listen to this, not because of initial attraction, not because of the goosebumps or the feelings, not because he did everything the right way that she wanted and she did everything the right way he wanted, not because of any of those things, but because of a willful choice to put the other first, to serve, to put that person as a willful choice to love them the rest of their lives. And that's the thing that we have to understand, that there are times in all of our relationships, and this is whether or not you're talking about a spouse, a close friend, people you worship with, anything else. When you make a willful choice to love that person and put their interest above yourself, that's the type of relationship that God is wanting us to have and to bring into our life. Every head bowed and every eye closed. Let's pray together.